Did knights really wear 100-pound metal suits? Could armored warriors actually move and fight? Was medieval armor truly the technological marvel historians claim it was? Number 5. The mega million-dollar industry of the Middle Ages. Ever wonder what the medieval version of your iPhone would be? Believe it or not, it was armor. Custom-fitted, technologically advanced, and outrageously expensive medieval armor was the ultimate status symbol and life-saving tech rolled into one shiny metal package. Back in the day, a complete set of plate armor could cost as much as a modern sports car. We're talking the equivalent of tens of thousands of dollars in today's money. A knight's full harness represented a massive investment that only the wealthy could afford. For perspective, a common laborer in the 14th century would need to work for several years to afford even the simplest mail shirt. The armor industry created entire economic ecosystems. Cities like Milan, Augsburg, and Nuremberg became famous manufacturing hubs where master craftsmen passed down closely guarded trade secrets through generations. These armor-making powerhouses employed thousands of specialized workers, from metal smelters and polishers to leather workers and decorative engravers. Armor workshops operated like exclusive fashion houses, with wealthy clients placing custom orders based on the latest battle trends and personal preferences. The most famous armorers became celebrities in their own right, with rulers across Europe competing to hire them for their personal armories. Emperor Maximilian I of Habsburg had his own court armorer, Konrad Susenhofer, whose creations were so distinctive they became known as Maximilian armor, setting fashion trends across Europe. The economic impact of armor production went beyond just the workshops. Raw materials had to be sourced from across the continent: high-quality iron from specific mining regions, leather from particular tanneries, and specialized tools from master blacksmiths. Trade routes developed specifically to supply these workshops, and middlemen made fortunes connecting resources with craftsmen. For the super rich, armor wasn't just protective equipment but a fashion statement and political tool. Tournament armor was often elaborately decorated with gold inlay, engraving, and even precious stones. Kings would commission multiple sets for different occasions: battlefield armor for war, parade armor for ceremonies, and jousting armor for tournaments. Perhaps the most mind-blowing aspect of this medieval industry was the level of client service. Master armorers would travel hundreds of miles to take detailed measurements of noble clients, sometimes staying at courts for weeks while perfecting fittings. They created what we might now call tech support, with specialized knowledge about repairs and maintenance that could mean life or death on the battlefield. Number 4. Engineering marvels that would make Tony Stark jealous. Think Iron Man suit is impressive. Medieval armorers were creating articulated metal body coverings that allowed full movement without modern tools, electricity, or computer modeling. The level of engineering precision in high-quality armor is genuinely astonishing. Each plate had to curve precisely to both deflect weapons and match the wearer's body contours. Joints needed to articulate smoothly without exposing vulnerable gaps. The distribution of weight across the body had to be carefully calculated to maintain balance and mobility. One of the most incredible engineering feats was the creation of functional articulated gauntlets, metal gloves with fully movable fingers. These complex pieces contained dozens of small plates connected by hidden rivets and sliding rivets that allowed knights to grip weapons and manipulate objects while keeping their hands protected. A well-made gauntlet allowed such dexterity that knights could pick up pins from the floor or right with a quill while fully armored. The helmets themselves represent remarkable achievements in metallurgy and design. Late medieval close helmets provided nearly complete head protection with sophisticated ventilation systems, pivoting visors, and internal padding systems. Some helmets incorporated multiple moving parts that could transform from open-faced for better visibility to completely enclosed for maximum protection in seconds. The masterwork of medieval engineering was perhaps the armor created for tournaments, the extreme sports of the era. Specialized jousting armor included asymmetrical designs with reinforced left sides to withstand the impact of lances. These suits featured shock-absorbing systems with plates designed to break away upon impact, innovative breathing mechanisms, and sight openings engineered to provide vision while minimizing vulnerability. What makes these engineering achievements even more impressive is that they were created without standardized measurements, using hand tools and relying on the armorer's eye and experience. Master armorers understood complex physical principles through practical application rather than formal study. They knew precisely how much hardening would make steel strong without becoming brittle, how to distribute impact forces across curved surfaces, and how to calculate the optimal thickness of metal for different body parts. Evidence of their genius lives on in the surviving examples. The Greenwich Armor Workshop, established by Henry VIII, produced suits with interchangeable pieces, essentially creating modular armor systems centuries before modular design became an engineering concept. Some surviving armors include ingenious features like self-locking clasps that could be secured one-handed and internal leather, and cord suspension systems that cushioned impacts. Perhaps most impressively, armor evolved rapidly in response to changing battlefield technology. When firearms became more prevalent, armorers developed proofed breastplates, literally tested by firing a pistol at them and including the dent as proof of their quality. This represented an early form of quality certification that would be familiar to modern engineers. Number 3. Fashion, function, and fear: the psychology of armor design. Did you know that medieval armor wasn't just about protection? It was also a psychological weapon designed to intimidate enemies and project power. The gleaming surfaces, inhuman silhouettes, and imposing profiles of armored knights were carefully crafted to inspire fear. German Gothic armor from the 15th century featured exaggerated angular surfaces and fluting that made the wearer appear larger and more threatening. Italian armor styles emphasized the classical ideal of the male form, with breastplates sculpted to resemble muscled torsos, the medieval equivalent of airbrushing your Instagram photos. The intimidation factor was so important that some helmet designs incorporated fearsome faces, with angry expressions hammered into the metal. The famous horned helmets, which were primarily ceremonial, transformed the wearer into something otherworldly and terrifying. Even standard battle helmets often featured decorative elements that heightened their imposing appearance. Color played a crucial psychological role too. While we typically imagine medieval armor as plain metal, much of it was actually painted, blued, blackened, or covered in fabric. Wealthy knights could afford to have their armor blued, a heat treatment that gave the metal a distinctive dark blue-black appearance, or even gold-plated. Textile coverings called juppons or surcoats displayed heraldic colors and symbols, serving both as battlefield identification and psychological warfare. Imagine the impact of seeing a formation of knights in matching blood-red surcoats charging toward you. Beyond intimidation, armor design responded to deeply personal fears. As weapons evolved, so did the specific protections against them. The terror of arrow wounds led to the development of specialized plate configurations that would deflect projectiles. The fear of facial disfigurement, particularly important in image-conscious noble society, drove innovations in helmet design. The development of increasingly protective gorgets, neck protections, reflected the particularly horrifying prospect of throat wounds. Armor wasn't just about the battlefield either. Tournament armor became a fashion runway for medieval nobility, with designs that showcased wealth and status. These suits were often decorated with elaborate etching, gold inlay, and personal motifs, the medieval equivalent of designer labels. Some tournament armor was so fashion-forward that it prioritized appearance over practical protection, reflecting the competitive social display that tournaments represented. The psychological comfort of armor cannot be underestimated. Knights trained in armor from a young age developed an intimate relationship with their protective equipment. Historical accounts describe knights feeling naked without their armor in battle situations. It became an extension of self and identity. This psychological dimension helps explain why knights were willing to endure the discomforts of wearing metal suits in hot weather and during long campaigns. Even the sound of armor had psychological significance. The distinctive sounds of an armored man moving, the clink of mail, the creak of leather straps, the subtle shifting of plates created an auditory presence that announced power and status. Some knights added small bells or other noisemakers to deliberately enhance their auditory impact, creating a form of psychological theater. Number 2, the myth-busting truth about wearing a metal suit. Remember that scene in A Knight's Tale where they have to crane the knight onto his horse? Total Hollywood nonsense. The reality of armor mobility might shock you. A properly fitted suit of plate armor weighed between 45 to 55 pounds, about the same as what modern firefighters carry with their equipment. The weight was distributed across the entire body, making it far less cumbersome than lugging around a heavy backpack. Knights in full armor could run, mount horses unassisted, and even perform cartwheels and somersaults if they were athletic enough. Surviving training manuals from the 15th century show armored knights practicing gymnastics, wrestling moves, and complex sword techniques that require significant agility. The myth of the immobile knight comes partly from tournaments where specialized jousting armor, much heavier and more restrictive than battlefield armor, was used, and partly from Victorian misconceptions that influenced our pop culture image of knights. The layering system of medieval armor was surprisingly sophisticated. Against the skin, knights wore a linen shirt and drawers for comfort and hygiene. Next came an arming doublet, a specialized garment with points, laces for attaching armor components. Some pieces attached directly to this doublet, while others secured with leather straps and buckles. Male interlinking metal rings covered vulnerable areas like the armpits, neck, and groin where articulated plates couldn't provide adequate protection. Heat management was a significant challenge, but not insurmountable. Knights didn't cook inside their armor as often depicted. The linen undergarments absorbed sweat, and the space between body and plate allowed for some air circulation. Knights from hot climates like Spain and Italy developed techniques for managing heat, including specialized undergarments and strategic ventilation in armor design. That said, fighting in full armor during summer was undoubtedly uncomfortable, but no more debilitating than playing modern football in August heat with full pads and helmet. The flexibility of well-made armor is demonstrated in surviving examples that allow remarkable ranges of motion. Tests with replica armor have shown that mobility was restricted by only about 10 to 20% compared to unarmored movement, a reasonable trade-off for protection against lethal weapons. The most significant limitations were to peripheral vision due to helmets and fine motor skills due to gauntlets, which knights trained extensively to overcome. Putting on armor wasn't a simple process, however. Knights required assistance from at least one other person, typically a squire or servant trained specifically for this purpose. The arming process followed a specific order, generally working from the ground up, with legs armored first, then torso, arms, and finally the head. A knight and experienced squire could complete the arming process in about 20 to 30 minutes, though rushing risked improper fitting that could prove dangerous in battle. The endurance factor of wearing armor has been scientifically studied. A 2011 study published in Historical Methods had subjects wear replica 15th century armor on treadmills. They found that walking and running in armor used 1.9 times more energy than doing so unarmored. While significant, this energy cost wasn't debilitating for trained fighters. It was comparable to carrying a heavy backpack. This explains why knights would often remove helmets and gauntlets when not actively fighting, saving energy for when it mattered most. Number 1, from chain mail to plate, how fear and death drove innovation. Did you know that every weird shape and curve in medieval armor exists because someone died horribly without it? Armor evolution represents one of history's longest-running arms races, with each innovation driven by battlefield deaths and new weapon developments. The earliest medieval armor was mail, often incorrectly called chain mail, interlocked metal rings that proved remarkably effective against slashing attacks but vulnerable to crushing blows and pointed thrusts. When knights started dying from lance thrusts that punctured their mail, armorers responded by adding a solid metal or hardened leather plate over the chest, the first component of what would eventually become full plate armor. Each addition to armor design addressed specific battlefield threats. Articulated gauntlets developed after hand injuries became common, with simpler mitten-style hand protections. Sabaton's foot armor evolved complex articulation after knights kept suffering foot injuries from both weapons and being stepped on by warhorses. The classic fald and tasset design, the skirt-like plates protecting the lower torso and upper legs, developed specifically to protect mounted knights from infantry attacking from below with spears and polearms. Perhaps the most dramatic evolution came in helmet design. Early medieval helmets were often simple conical shapes with nasal guards. As facial injuries increased, cheek protections were added. When knights started suffering eye injuries, visors were developed. Each gruesome battlefield injury drove specific improvements, culminating in the fully enclosed helmets of the 15th century that protected the entire head while maintaining visibility and ventilation. The development of plate armor wasn't a smooth progression but occurred in different regions at different rates, often influenced by local fighting styles and available resources. Italian armor emphasized mobility and lighter weight for the warmer Mediterranean climate, while German Gothic armor featured more angular designs and greater coverage for the cooler northern battlefield conditions. Armor adaptation accelerated during the Hundred Years' War, 1337 to 1453, when longbow arrows and early firearms forced rapid innovation. Armorers responded with ingenious designs like the stiffened point and outward flange on breastplates that helped deflect arrows and custom-hardened steel that could withstand early firearm projectiles. The distinctive globular breastplate shape that emerged in the late 15th century wasn't just a fashion choice, its rounded form was specifically engineered to deflect bullets. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of armor evolution was the regional specialization. Spanish armor featured distinctive elements adapted to fighting the Moors. Eastern European armor incorporated design elements to counter steppe nomad tactics. Even within Western Europe, battlefield threats drove different priorities. English armor responded to the prevalence of longbows, while Italian designs addressed the widespread use of crossbows. As firearms became more powerful and prevalent in the 16th century, armorers engaged in a desperate innovation race. They developed proofed armors with thicker breastplates, specialized reinforcing plates, and more sophisticated hardening techniques. Some late breastplates were made asymmetrical, with the left side, which faced the enemy when riding, significantly thicker than the right to save weight while maintaining protection. Eventually, firearms won this arms race. By the 17th century, full armor had become too heavy to be practical against increasingly powerful guns. Armor didn't disappear but evolved once again, with soldiers retaining the most crucial elements, typically helmets and breastplates, while abandoning the rest. This selective approach to protection continues today in modern military and police gear, which still protects vital areas while balancing weight and mobility concerns. Did medieval armor smiths realize they were creating technological masterpieces that would still impress engineers 6 centuries later? Would today's soldiers recognize the same balance of protection, mobility, and psychological factors in their own gear? What cutting-edge protection technology are we developing today that future generations will marvel at with the same wonder we feel looking at a perfectly preserved suit of medieval armor?